The sound of shattering glass wasn't nearly as loud as the suffocating silence that followed, but the look of absolute terror on the manager's face when she realized the man standing in the doorway wasn't just a customer, but my husband, was worth every second of the pain. The craving had started as a whisper in the back of my mind around noon, but by 3 in the afternoon, it was a screaming demand. Truffle risotto. Not just any risotto, but the specific, creamy, gold-flecked dish served at the Gilded Spoon, the most pretentious and exclusive restaurant in the city center. I rubbed my swollen belly, trying to soothe the little energetic being kicking my ribs. All right, I hear you," I murmured, wincing as a particularly sharp kick caught my bladder. "We'll get the risotto. But Daddy is going to be so annoyed if he finds out we went out without security." My husband, Julian Blackwood, wasn't just an alpha, he was the alpha. The CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, a man whose name made politicians sweat and competitors sell their companies for scraps. To the world, he was a ruthless tycoon, a predator in a three-piece suit. To me, he was just Julian, the man who rubbed my feet every night and read bedtime stories to my belly, his deep voice vibrating against my skin. We had kept our marriage a secret for 2 years. Not because we were ashamed, but because Julian wanted to protect me. The media was vicious, and I was just Leo. A scholarship student from the quiet side of town, an Omega with no powerful family name and no fortune. If the world knew I was carrying the Blackwood heir, the target on my back would be the size of a skyscraper. Just a quick trip, I convinced myself, pulling on an oversized beige sweater that hid the definition of my bump but couldn't disguise the obvious curve. I paired it with comfortable leggings and sneakers. I knew I didn't look like the typical clientele of the Gilded Spoon. I didn't have diamonds dripping from my ears or a watch that cost more than a house. I looked like a tired, pregnant student. Which, to be fair, was exactly what I was before Julian swept me off my feet. I checked my phone. Julian was in a board meeting until 6. I had plenty of time to sneak out, eat, and be back in our penthouse before he even loosened his tie. I called a cab, avoiding the personal driver Julian had hired because I knew he would report my location immediately. When the cab dropped me off in front of the restaurant, I felt a familiar wave of anxiety. The building was intimidating, all glass and polished steel, with a velvet rope guarding the entrance. A valet was parking a Ferrari nearby. I took a deep breath, clutching my phone tight. "You are Julian Blackwood's husband," I told myself. "You own half of this city by marriage. You just want some rice." I walked up to the entrance. The hostess, a young beta woman with a kind smile, looked up from her podium. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Do you have a reservation?" she asked politely. No, actually," I admitted, giving her a sheepish smile. "I was hoping you might have a table for one. It's a bit of a pregnancy emergency." I patted my stomach lightly. She chuckled softly. "Let me check. We are quite booked, but since it's pre-dinner rush, we might. Is there a problem here, Sarah?" The voice was sharp, icy, and instantly grated on my nerves. I looked up to see a woman approaching. She was tall, wearing a severe black suit that looked tailored to within an inch of its life. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and her eyes, cold, calculating eyes, swept over me with immediate disdain. I recognized her. Not personally, but I recognized the type. An alpha who believed status was everything. "No problem, Ms. Vance," Sarah said quickly, her posture stiffening. "This gentleman was just asking for a table." I was checking the. "We are fully booked," Ms. Vance interrupted, not even looking at Sarah. Her gaze was fixed on my sneakers. She curled her lip as if she smelled something rotting. "Completely full. 4 months." "Oh," I said, my heart sinking. The baby kicked again, disappointed. "I understand. Is there any way I could order takeout? I really just need the truffle risotto." Ms. Vance laughed. It wasn't a happy sound, it was a bark of incredulity. "Takeout? This is a Michelin star establishment, not a drive-through. We do not do takeout." She took a step closer, invading my personal space. Her pheromones hit me, burnt sugar and something chemically sharp. It was an aggressive scent, designed to intimidate. And frankly, we have a dress code. Sweatpants and, whatever those are, she gestured vaguely at my comfortable shoes, are strictly prohibited. I felt my face heat up. These are designer, I mumbled, though I knew it didn't matter. Look, I'm willing to pay extra. I'm just really hungry, and I don't care if you're starving, she snapped. We don't serve your kind here. I blinked, confused. My kind? Omegas who think they can waltz into high society establishments looking like beggars, hoping to snag a wealthy alpha, she sneered, her voice raising enough that people in the lobby started to turn and look. I know your game. You get pregnant by some lowlife, then you come to places like this to trap a rich man into paying for your mistake. It's pathetic. The accusation was so wild, so far from the truth, that I almost laughed. Excuse me? I'm married. My husband is probably flipping burgers somewhere, wondering where you are. She cut me off. Leave. Now. Before I call security to drag you out. My protective instincts flared. I placed a hand over my belly, stepping back. There is no need for that. I'm leaving. I turned to go, humiliation burning my cheeks. I just wanted to get out of there. I wanted to go home, curl up in Julian's nest, and forget this happened. But as I turned, my clumsy foot caught on the edge of the thick welcome mat. I stumbled. It wasn't a bad fall. I caught myself on a nearby waiter's tray station, but in the process, my elbow knocked over a pitcher of ice water resting there. Splash. The freezing water didn't hit the floor. It hit Ms. Vance. It soaked the front of her pristine black suit. The entire lobby went silent. The diners near the entrance stopped chewing. The music seemed to stop. Ms. Vance looked down at her wet blouse, then up at me. Her face turned a violent shade of red. You clumsy, useless little rat, she shrieked. I'm so sorry. I gasped, reaching for a napkin from the station. I tripped. I didn't mean to. She slapped my hand away hard. Don't touch me. You did that on purpose. I didn't. It was an accident. Security, she screamed. Get this trash out of my restaurant. And make him pay for the cleaning bill. This suit cost more than his entire life. 2 large alpha security guards appeared from the shadows. They didn't look like the professional, highly trained security Julian employed. These men looked like bouncers, rough and eager for a fight. One of them grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, bruising. Hey! Let go! I cried out, panic rising in my chest. You're hurting me. You heard the lady, the guard grunted, dragging me toward the door. Wait! Please! I struggled, trying to keep my footing so I wouldn't fall on my stomach. I'm pregnant. Be careful. You should have thought about that before you assaulted the manager, the guard sneered. They dragged me out onto the sidewalk. It had started to rain, a miserable drizzle that matched my mood. The guard shoved me, and I stumbled, falling onto my hands and knees on the wet pavement. My palms scraped against the concrete, stinging sharply. And stay out, the guard barked, dusting his hands off before retreating back inside. I knelt there for a moment, stunned. The cold rain soaked through my sweater immediately. My knees were throbbing, my hands were bleeding slightly, and I was crying. Not from pain, but from the sheer, crushing humiliation. I was Julian Blackwood's husband. I had millions of dollars in a joint bank account. And I had just been thrown out of a restaurant like a stray dog. I struggled to stand up, wiping the tears from my face. I needed to call Julian. No, I couldn't call him. He would burn the city down. I needed to just go home. But as I reached for my phone in my pocket, I realized it was gone. It must have fallen out when they dragged me or when I fell. I looked back at the glass doors. My phone was lying on the carpet inside, right near the hostess stand. I couldn't leave it. It had pictures of the baby scans. It had Julian's private number. I took a shaky breath, smoothed down my wet sweater, and walked back to the door. I pushed it open. I said, "Stay out." Miss Vance was there instantly, as if she had been waiting for me to try again. She blocked my path, her arms crossed. "My phone," I said, my voice trembling. "It's on the floor. Please, just let me get my phone and I'll leave." She looked down at the phone, then back at me. A cruel smile twisted her lips. She stepped on the phone. I heard the crunch of the screen cracking under her heel. "Oops," she said, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Looks like you shouldn't have dropped it. Why are you doing this?" I whispered, feeling sick. "Because people like you need to learn their place," she hissed, leaning in close. "You think because you're pretty and pregnant, the world owes you something? You're nothing. You're dirt. Now get out before I have the boys throw you into the street for real this time." I stared at her, paralyzed by her cruelty. The diners were watching. Some were filming with their phones. Snickering. Whispering. "Look at him," I heard a woman at a nearby table say. "So trashy. Probably doesn't even know who the father is." "Disgusting," her partner agreed. I felt small. Tiny. I wished the ground would open up and swallow me whole. I turned around, defeated, ready to walk into the rain and walk the 5 miles home if I had to. But the revolving doors at the entrance suddenly stopped moving. A black sleek limousine had pulled up to the curb, right in the no parking zone. The driver's door opened, and a uniformed chauffeur stepped out, opening an umbrella. But he didn't open the back door. The back door flew open from the inside with force. A man stepped out. He was tall, over 6'3", with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his charcoal gray suit. His hair was dark, slicked back but slightly messy from the wind. He didn't look at the valet who rushed to offer him a ticket. He didn't look at the rain. He looked straight at me. Even through the glass, even from 20 feet away, the force of his aura hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't the aggressive, chemical scent of Ms. Vance. It was the scent of a storm, ozone, cedarwood, and sheer, terrifying power. It was Julian. And he looked murderous. He must have tracked my phone. He must have seen that I was stationary here. Or maybe he just felt it through our bond, the spike of my distress. Ms. Vance, noticing my stare, turned around to see what I was looking at. Her eyes widened. Every person in the restaurant who knew anything about power or money froze. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. The whispers died instantly. Julian Blackwood strode toward the entrance. He didn't walk, he prowled. The security guard who had shoved me stepped in his way, foolishly trying to do his job. "Sir, you can't park." Julian didn't even slow down. He simply looked at the man. I couldn't hear what he said through the glass, but I saw the guard's face drain of all color. The man stepped back so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet, bowing his head in submission. Julian pushed through the doors. The air in the lobby instantly became heavy, charged with the pheromones of a furious dominant alpha. He didn't look at the staff. He walked straight to me. His eyes scanned me instantly, taking in my wet hair, the dirt on my knees, the scrape on my hands, and the tears in my eyes. His expression, usually so composed, fractured into something raw and terrifying. "Leo," he breathed, his voice low and vibrating with suppressed rage. He reached out, his large, warm hands cupping my face, wiping away a raindrop. "Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" I'm okay," I stammered, leaning into his touch, my legs suddenly weak with relief. I fell." "You fell?" Julian repeated. He looked at my scraped palms. Then he looked at the wet pavement outside. Then he looked at the managers and the security guards. He slowly turned his head to face Ms. Vance. Ms. Vance was trembling. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly who Julian Blackwood was. Everyone knew. He owned the building this restaurant was in. He owned the bank that held their loans. Mr. Blackwood," she stuttered, her previous arrogance evaporating like mist. She tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. What an honor. We didn't know you were coming. We would have prepared the private room. Julian ignored her greeting. He didn't release me. He kept one arm firmly wrapped around my waist, pulling me into his side, claiming me, protecting me. Why is my husband wet? Julian asked. His voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. It was the kind of voice that made you want to hide under a table. Ms. Vance blinked, confused. She looked around, as if searching for Julian's husband. Then her eyes landed back on me. Her jaw dropped. Husband? I asked you a question, Julian said, his voice dropping an octave, a growl rumbling in his chest that I could feel against my ribs. Why is my pregnant husband standing here, shivering, with bleeding hands, while you stand there dry and comfortable? The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. I didn't know, Ms. Vance whispered, her face pale. He didn't say, he looked. He looked like what? Julian challenged, stepping closer to her. The sheer pressure of his presence made her take a stumbling step back. He looked like someone you could bully? Someone you could abuse because you thought he had no one to defend him? Sir, he caused a disturbance, she tried to defend herself, desperation creeping into her voice. He spilled water on me. Look at my suit. Julian glanced at the water stain on her suit. Then he looked at me. Did you spill water on her, Leo? It was an accident, I whispered. I tripped when they were kicking me out. Kicking you out, Julian repeated the words as if tasting them. They tasted like poison to him. He looked at the phone on the floor, the one Miss Vance had stepped on. He recognized the case. It was a custom one he had given me. He walked over to it, the sound of his expensive Italian leather shoes echoing in the silent lobby. He picked up the smashed device. He looked at Miss Vance. You stepped on this? It was an accident, she lied. Julian didn't answer. He simply dropped the phone back onto the floor. Who touched him? Julian asked, turning to the room at large. I want to know who put their hands on my husband. Now. The security guard who had shoved me was trying to melt into the wall. Julian's eyes snapped to him. The predator had found its prey. You, Julian said. It wasn't a question. The guard started to shake. I was just following orders, Mr. Blackwood. Ms. Vance told me to remove him. Did she tell you to push a pregnant man onto the concrete? Julian asked, walking slowly toward the guard. I didn't. Julian, I said softly, tugging on his sleeve. I could feel his rage spiking, and while a part of me, the Omega part, was reveling in my mate defending me, I didn't want him to kill someone in the lobby of an Italian restaurant. I just want to go home. Please. Julian stopped. He closed his eyes for a second, taking a deep breath, reining in the violence that was simmering under his skin. He turned back to me, his expression softening instantly. Okay, baby, he murmured, kissing my forehead. We'll go home. He took off his suit jacket, a bespoke piece worth thousands, and draped it over my shoulders. It was warm and smelled like him, instantly calming my nerves. He guided me toward the door, but before we left, he stopped and turned back to Ms. Vance. Enjoy your restaurant, Ms. Vance, Julian said coolly. Mr. Blackwood, please, let me explain, she begged, stepping forward. There is nothing to explain, Julian said. He pulled out his phone, his own phone, pristine and functional. He dialed a number and put it to his ear, his eyes never leaving hers. Edwards, he said into the phone. Yes. I'm at the Gilded Spoon. By the building. Yes, right now. And cancel their lease. Effective immediately. Ms. Vance gasped. You can't do that. And Edwards? Julian continued, ignoring her. Ensure that the manager, a Miss Vance, is blacklisted from every hospitality establishment in the city. If I see her serving so much as a coffee in this town again, I will hold you personally responsible. He hung up. He looked at Miss Vance one last time. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, her career and reputation incinerated in 30 seconds. "You should have learned," Julian said coldly, "that you never judge a book by its cover. Especially when that book belongs to me." With that, he guided me out into the rain, where the chauffeur was waiting with the door held open. I slid into the warm leather interior of the limo, the scent of safety wrapping around me. Julian climbed in beside me, pulling me into his lap, burying his face in my neck. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my skin, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have been there." "You're here now," I said, stroking his hair. As the car pulled away, I looked back through the tinted window. I saw the lights of the Gilded Spoon still shining, but I knew it was already over. The darkness had been driven away, not by the sun, but by the fire of an alpha who would burn the world to keep me warm. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see what happened next. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, The Weight of Silence. The silence inside the limousine was hermetically sealed, a stark contrast to the chaotic, rain-slick pavement we had just left behind. The outside world, the humiliating stares, the cold rain, the venomous voice of Miss Vance, felt a million miles away, locked out by bulletproof glass and reinforced steel. But inside, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of distress. My distress. And Julian's barely contained fury. I sat huddled in the corner of the plush leather seat, Julian's massive suit jacket still draped over my shoulders like a weighted blanket. It smelled of cedarwood, ozone, and the deep, rich musk that was uniquely him. Usually, that scent was my anchor, the thing that settled my stomach and slowed my racing heart. But right now, it was spiked with something sharp and metallic, the scent of an alpha who had been pushed to the edge of violence. Julian hadn't let go of me since we got in. One of his arms was wrapped securely around my waist, his large hand resting protectively over the curve of my belly, his thumb rubbing rhythmic, soothing circles against the fabric of my sweater. "Let me see your hands," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together, but the volume was low. I hesitated, feeling foolish. "It's nothing, Julian. Just a scratch." "Leo." It wasn't a request. It was a command, softened only by the look in his eyes. I slowly lifted my hands. The streetlights flashing past the tinted windows illuminated the damage. My palms were raw, the skin abraded and red, with tiny beads of blood welling up where the concrete had bitten deep. Dirt was embedded in the scrapes. They stung, a sharp, throbbing reminder of my fall. Julian hissed in a breath, a sound of pure pain. He looked at my hands as if they were a personal failure of his own making. He reached into the compartment beside him, pulling out a first aid kit and a bottle of water. "This is going to sting," he murmured. He poured the water over a clean cloth and began to gently dab at the dirt. I winced, my breath hitching. I know," he whispered, blowing softly on the wounds. "I've got you." "I'm sorry." "Why are you apologizing?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I'm the one who went out. I'm the one who tripped. I embarrassed you." Julian's hand froze. He looked up, his gray eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. "Embarrass me?" he repeated, his tone incredulous. "Yes," I whispered, looking down at my knees. The manager, she was right. I don't look like I belong in your world. I look like a scholarship student in sweatpants. If people knew I was your husband, if the press saw me on the ground like that, it would ruin your image. The powerful Julian Blackwood, married to a clumsy, pregnant nobody. The air in the car shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to drop. Julian tossed the cloth aside and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. His grip was firm, possessive. "Listen to me very closely, Leo," he said, his voice dropping into that deep, vibrating register that resonated in my bones. "You are not a nobody. You are my mate. You are the carrier of my air. You are the only person in this entire godforsaken city who matters to me." He leaned in closer, his nose brushing against mine, inhaling my scent, vanilla and milk, now soured by fear. He frowned, hating that he could smell my anxiety. "My image?" he scoffed. Do you think I care about what a room full of sycophants and social climbers think? I built an empire with my bare hands so that I could give you everything. If the world doesn't think you're good enough, then I will burn the world down and build a new one that worships the ground you walk on. But she said, she is a gnat, Julian growled. A bug I have already crushed. Do not let her poison into your head. He kissed my forehead, then my nose, then my lips, a chaste, lingering kiss that tasted of promise. The only mistake I made was keeping you hidden. I thought I was protecting you from the vultures. I thought if no one knew who you were, you would be safe. He pulled back, his eyes hardening with a new resolve. I was wrong. My silence didn't protect you. It made you a target. It made people think you were weak. Defenseless. He went back to cleaning my hand, but his movements were more decisive now. That ends tonight. What do you mean? I asked, a flutter of nervousness in my chest. I mean, he said, bandaging my hand with expert precision, that I am done hiding. I am done playing the Bachelor CEO. Tomorrow night is the Blackwood Charity Gala. It is the biggest event of the season. Every camera, every journalist, every rival I have will be there. He finished the bandage and kissed my palm. And you will be there by my side. As my husband. As Mr. Blackwood. My eyes widened. Julian, no. I can't. I'm huge. I don't fit into any suits. I'll look like a whale next to all those models and movie stars. You will look beautiful, he stated simply. And anyone who says otherwise will answer to me. The car slowed to a halt. We had arrived at the penthouse. The private elevator opened directly into our foyer. As soon as we stepped inside, the familiar scent of our home, lavender detergent, old books, and safety wrapped around me. But the night wasn't over. Julian carried me, literally swept me off my feet into a bridal carry, all the way to the master bathroom. He set me down on the edge of the oversized marble tub and started running the water. Julian, I can bathe myself, I protested feebly, though my legs felt like jelly. Allow me, he said. He knelt before me, untying my sneakers. He took them off, then peeled off my socks. He frowned at my ankles, which were slightly swollen. You were on your feet too long. He stripped me of my wet clothes with a reverence that made me blush, even after 2 years of marriage. He helped me into the warm water, adding essential oils that were safe for the baby. As I sank into the heat, groaning in relief, Julian rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a sponge. He washed my back, his touch gentle but firm. The water turned the scrape on my knee pink, but the pain was fading, replaced by the overwhelming comfort of being cared for by my alpha. I was craving risotto, I admitted quietly into the steam. Julian paused, the sponge resting on my shoulder. Is that why you went? Yes. The truffle risotto. The baby really wanted it. And I didn't want to bother you at work. Julian chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that I felt against my back. He kissed the nape of my neck. Leo, you could ask for the moon, and I would find a way to harvest it. Never think you were bothering me. Next time, you call me. Or you call the chef. I will hire that chef personally if I have to. You bought the building, I reminded him. Isn't that enough? For now, he said darkly. But Ms. Vance, she represents a rot in this city. A disrespect that I cannot tolerate. After the bath, Julian dried me off and dressed me in one of his softest t-shirts, which hung to my knees. He led me to the bed, where he had already built a nest of pillows and blankets earlier that morning. It was an omega instinct to nest, but Julian, despite being an alpha, loved to help me build it. He knew it made me feel safe. He tucked me in, pulling the duvet up to my chin. Sleep. The doctor will come in the morning to check the baby, just to be sure. But I can hear his heartbeat. It's strong. Stay with me? I asked, reaching for his hand. Always. He climbed in beside me, wrapping his large frame around my smaller one, acting as a human shield against the nightmares. I fell asleep to the sound of his breathing and the steady beat of his heart. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of truffle risotto. I blinked open my eyes, confused. Sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The clock on the bedside table read 10 a.m. Julian was usually gone by 7 o'clock. I sat up, stretching carefully. My knees were stiff, and my palms throbbed a little, but otherwise, I felt rested. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty." Julian walked into the room, holding a tray. On it was a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice, a bowl of fruit, and a steaming plate of golden, creamy risotto. "Is that?" "From the gilded spoon," Julian said, setting the tray down on the bed. He sat on the edge, looking smug. "Or rather, from the chef who used to work there. I hired him this morning. He is now part of our private kitchen staff." My jaw dropped. "You hired the chef? Just for risotto?" "He makes excellent pastries as well," Julian shrugged, picking up a spoon and offering me a bite. "Open." I took the bite. It was heaven. Creamy, earthy, perfect. I moaned in appreciation. "Better?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Much better," I mumbled around the rice. "But Julian, you didn't have to hire him." "I take care of my own," he said. Then his expression turned serious. "Eat up. We have a busy day. The tailors are coming at noon." "Tailors?" "For the gala tonight," he reminded me. "I had a suit designed for you overnight. It will accommodate the bump comfortably." My stomach did a flip that had nothing to do with the baby. "You're really serious about this? About tonight?" "Deadly serious," Julian said. He reached out and touched my cheek. "I spent the morning making calls. The rumors have already started. Someone posted a video of what happened yesterday. It's grainy, but people recognize me." I froze. "A video?" "Don't worry," Julian said quickly. "My team has already scrubbed the worst of the comments. But the cat is out of the bag. People know I defended a mystery pregnant man. If we don't control the narrative now, the tabloids will invent one. They'll call you a mistress, a sugar baby, a fling. I won't let them label you." He took my hand, careful of the bandage. "Tonight, we walk in the front door. We take photos. And I introduce you as my husband. Once you are officially a Blackwood in the public eye, no one, not a manager, not a critic, not a rival, will dare to touch you. The Blackwood name is a shield, Leo. Let me give it to you." I looked at him. I saw the love in his eyes, but also the strategic iron of his will. He was right. Hiding had only made me vulnerable. It was time to step into the light, even if the light was terrifying. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's do it." 7 p.m. The Grand Ballroom, the Ritz-Carlton. The flashbulbs were blinding. That was my first thought as the limousine door opened. It was a wall of white light, a strobe effect that made me dizzy. The noise was deafening, shouting photographers, the roar of the crowd, the click-click-click of shutters. "Mr. Blackwood." "Over here." "Who is the guest?" "Is that a baby bump?" I gripped Julian's arm so hard I thought I might rip his tuxedo jacket. I was wearing a midnight blue velvet suit, tailored perfectly to hug my shoulders and drape elegantly over my swollen stomach. It was comfortable, chic, and screamed money. My hair had been styled, my skin glowed from the spa treatment Julian had insisted on. But I still felt like the boy in sneakers who had fallen in the mud. "Breathe," Julian whispered in my ear. He stepped out first, buttoning his jacket. He turned back, extending his hand to me. "Eyes on me, Leo. Just look at me." I took his hand. He pulled me out of the car and immediately tucked my hand into the crook of his arm. He stood tall, projecting an aura of absolute dominance. The alpha pheromones rolling off him were controlled but potent, a warning to every other alpha in the vicinity to back off. We walked the red carpet. Julian didn't stop for interviews. He didn't smile for the cameras. He walked with a singular purpose, guiding me through the gauntlet. Every time a reporter shouted a rude question, "Who's the boy toy, Blackwood?" Julian's gaze would snap to them, cold and silencing, before moving on. We reached the entrance of the ballroom. The noise of the outside faded, replaced by the murmur of hundreds of wealthy, influential people. Waiters circulated with champagne. A string quartet played in the corner. As we stepped inside, the room went quiet. It was the same silence as the restaurant, but on a massive scale. 500 heads turned. I felt naked. Exposed. "Chin up," Julian murmured. "You own this room." He led me toward the center, where the host of the gala, the mayor of the city, was standing. But before we could get there, a voice cut through the murmurs. "Well, well. Julian Blackwood. And bringing a pet to a formal event? How bold." We stopped. Standing in our path was Silas Thorne. If Julian was the king of the business world, Silas Thorne was the pretender to the throne. A rival CEO, an aggressive alpha with a reputation for dirty dealings. He had been trying to buy out Julian's shipping division for years. Silas smirked, his eyes raking over me with open lasciviousness. "He's a pretty one, I'll give you that. A bit ripe, though, isn't he? Didn't know you were into second-hand goods." The insult was gross, implying the baby wasn't Julian's. I felt Julian's muscles turn to granite under my hand. The air around us crackled. The string quartet seemed to falter. Julian slowly released my arm and took a step toward Silas. He smiled. It was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were dead. "Silas," Julian said, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. "I'm glad you're here. I was actually meaning to speak to you." "Oh?" Silas chuckled, swirling his drink. "About the shipping deal?" "No," Julian said. He reached out and straightened Silas's lapel, a gesture that looked friendly but was actually a display of dominance. "I wanted to introduce you to someone." Julian gestured to me. "This is Leo Blackwood. My husband." Silas froze. The smirk fell off his face. "Husband?" "Yes," Julian continued, his voice raising slightly so the surrounding crowd could hear. "And the father of the child he is carrying." "My child." The gasp that went through the room was audible. So, Julian leaned in closer to Silas, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that only Silas and I could hear. "If you ever refer to my husband as goods or pet again, I won't just buy your company, Silas. I will dismantle it, piece by piece, and I will make sure the IRS receives that file regarding your offshore accounts in the Caymans. Do we understand each other?" Silas turned pale. He swallowed hard, looking from Julian to me. The aggression leaked out of him, replaced by fear. My apologies," Silas stammered. "I didn't know." "Congratulations, Mr. Blackwood. To both of you. Run along now," Julian dismissed him like a servant. Silas hurried away. Julian turned back to me, the monster receding, the loving husband returning. He winked. "See? Just gnats." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A small smile touched my lips. He really would burn the world down. But just as I was starting to relax, just as I thought the night might actually be okay, a flash of movement caught my eye near the service entrance of the ballroom. A figure was standing there, watching us. Not a guest. A woman in a staff uniform. It was Ms. Vance. She wasn't dressed in her manager's suit. She was wearing a server's uniform, looking haggard and angry. But her eyes were locked on me with a hatred that made my blood run cold. She held a tray of champagne glasses, her knuckles white. Julian didn't see her. He was greeting the mayor. I watched as Ms. Vance started to move through the crowd, not away from us, but towards us. She wasn't looking at the floor. She wasn't doing her job. She was moving with a manic focus, her hand slipping into the pocket of her apron. Something silver glinted in her hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Julian," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "One moment, darling," Julian said, laughing at something the mayor said. Ms. Vance was 20 feet away. 10 feet. She wasn't holding a wine opener. It was a steak knife. Panic exploded in my brain. I didn't think. I couldn't scream. The instinct to protect the baby, to protect Julian, took over. Julian! I screamed, throwing my weight against him just as Ms. Vance lunged out of the crowd, the knife raising in a deadly arc. The ballroom erupted into chaos. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Shattered Glass and Steel Hearts. The scream tore through my throat, raw and primal, a sound I didn't recognize as my own. Julian! Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing all at once. I saw the glint of the serrated steak knife under the crystal chandeliers. I saw the madness in Ms. Vance's eyes, pupils dilated, teeth bared in a rictus of pure hatred. I saw the confusion on Julian's face as he turned from the mayor, his reflexes lagging just a fraction of a second behind my own because his back had been turned. I didn't think about the baby. I didn't think about my own safety. The Omega instinct to protect my mate surged forward, overriding everything else. I threw my body weight against Julian, shoving his massive frame to the right. The shove was clumsy, fueled by panic. It sent Julian stumbling, his shoulder hitting the mayor. But it moved him just enough. The knife, aimed for Julian's kidney, missed its intended target. Instead, as Ms. Vance's arm descended with terrifying force, the blade slashed through the air where Julian had been standing a millisecond before. But she didn't stop. Her momentum carried her forward, colliding directly with me. We crashed to the floor. The impact was jarring. My hip hit the polished marble with a sickening thud. I curled instinctively, wrapping my arms around my belly to shield the baby, squeezing my eyes shut as I waited for the bite of the steel. You ruined everything. Ms. Vance shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. She was on top of me, grappling, the knife raised again. You filthy little rat. You took my job. You took my life. I stared up at the blade, paralyzed. The smell of her, stale sweat, cheap alcohol, and rotting bitterness, was suffocating. But before she could bring the knife down, a dark blur collided with her. It wasn't a person, it was a force of nature. Julian roared. It was a sound that didn't belong in a civilized ballroom. It was the roar of a lion seeing its cub threatened. He didn't just pull her off me, he ripped her away. He grabbed her by the back of her uniform and flung her backward as if she weighed nothing more than a rag doll. Ms. Vance flew through the air, crashing into a table of champagne flutes. Glass shattered explosively, a symphony of destruction that silenced the entire room. She tried to scramble up, still clutching the knife, blood dripping from her forehead where the glass had cut her. But she never got the chance. Julian was on her. He didn't hit her. He stepped on her wrist, the one holding the knife. Crack! The sound of bones snapping echoed through the silent hall. Ms. Vance screamed, dropping the weapon as her hand went limp. Julian kicked the knife away, sending it skittering across the floor. He stood over her, his chest heaving, his hands balled into fists so tight his knuckles were white. The aura radiating from him was suffocating. Omegas in the room whimpered and hid behind their alphas. Even other alphas stepped back, their instincts warning them that a predator of a higher order was on the hunt. You dared, Julian hissed, his voice trembling with a rage so profound it sounded almost calm. You dared to touch him. He. Ms. Vance sobbed, clutching her broken wrist, cowering on the floor amidst the broken glass and spilled champagne. Julian! I tried to sit up, but a sharp, blinding pain shot through my lower abdomen. It wasn't the hip I had fallen on. It was deeper. I gasped, clutching my stomach. Julian. The sound of my voice snapped him out of his bloodlust instantly. He turned, his eyes wild, searching for me. When he saw me on the floor, his face drained of all color. Leo! He was beside me in an instant, dropping to his knees, ignoring the expensive tuxedo trousers staining with spilled wine. His hands hovered over me, terrified to touch, terrified not to. Where are you hurt? Did she cut you? Tell me! His voice was frantic, bordering on panic. No cut, I wheezed, squeezing his hand. But, my stomach. It hurts. Julian, it hurts. Julian looked down. His eyes widened. There was no blood on my velvet suit. But the look of agony on my face was enough to stop his heart. Security. Julian bellowed. The command shook the walls. Clear the exit. Now. He didn't wait for a stretcher. He didn't wait for paramedics. He scooped me up into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. I buried my face in his neck, inhaling the scent of cedar and ozone, trying to ground myself against the waves of cramping pain. Stay with me, Leo, he commanded, running toward the exit. Focus on my voice. Just listen to my voice. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to speak. No one dared to take a picture. The sight of Julian Blackwood carrying his pregnant husband, his face a mask of terrified determination, was too raw, too intimate. As we passed the security team who had finally pinned the sobbing Miss Vance to the ground, Julian didn't even look at her. But he threw a command over his shoulder to his head of security, Edwards. Don't let the police have her yet, Julian snarled. Keep her. I want to have a conversation with her once my husband is safe. The menace in those words made the security guards shiver. The limousine ride was a blur of speed and lights. I was lying across the back seat, my head in Julian's lap. He was barking orders into his phone, mobilizing the best obstetricians in the city, demanding they be ready at St. Jude's Hospital, the wing his family funded. Hold on, baby, he whispered, stroking my hair with a trembling hand. We're almost there. Just breathe. The baby. I whispered, tears leaking from my eyes. I fell hard, Julian. If I lost him because of some stupid risotto. Stop it, he said fiercely. This is not about risotto. This is about a deranged woman. This is not your fault. And we are not losing him. Do you hear me? You are a Blackwood. You are strong. He is strong. But I could feel his fear. It was leaking through the bond, a cold, oily dread that coated my insides. Julian Blackwood could buy buildings, destroy companies, and break bones. But he couldn't fight biology. He couldn't fight fate. And that powerlessness was tearing him apart. The car screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance. A team of doctors and nurses was already waiting, a gurney prepped. The doors flew open. Julian carried me out and placed me gently onto the sheets. Abdominal trauma, roughly 30 weeks gestation, Julian barked the medical details he had memorized. Severe cramping. Possible placental abruption. We've got him, Mr. Blackwood, a senior doctor said, shining a light in my eyes. Let's move! They started running, pushing the gurney down the sterile white corridor. Julian ran alongside, holding my hand until we reached the double doors of the surgical wing. Sir, you can't come in yet, a nurse said firmly, blocking his path. We need a sterile environment. That is my husband! Julian roared, trying to push past her. Julian! I called out, my voice weak. The pain was getting worse, a tightening band around my middle. Let them work. Please. Just let them save him. Julian froze. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed, his chest heaving. He looked like a man watching his soul being wheeled away. He nodded, a jerky, broken motion. He squeezed my hand one last time, then let go. I'll be right here, he promised. Right outside this door. I'm not going anywhere. The door swung shut, cutting off the sight of him. The last thing I saw was Julian Blackwood, the billionaire alpha, collapsing onto a plastic waiting room chair, burying his face in his hands. Darkness. Then light. Then the rhythmic beeping of a machine. I floated in a haze for a while. I felt heavy, tired, but the sharp, stabbing pain was gone, replaced by a dull ache. I blinked my eyes open. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the medical equipment. I was in a private suite, more like a hotel room than a hospital. I tried to move, and immediately, a warm hand covered mine. Don't, a rough voice whispered. Don't move. I turned my head. Julian was sitting in a chair next to the bed. He looked wrecked. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up. His hair was a mess, as if he had been running his fingers through it for hours. And his eyes, usually so piercing and clear, were bloodshot and shadowed with exhaustion. Julian, I croaked. My throat was dry. He immediately poured a glass of water with a straw and held it to my lips. I drank greedily. The baby, I asked, the memory of the night rushing back. Is he? Julian let out a long, shuddering breath. He leaned his forehead against our joined hands. He's fine, Julian whispered. The relief in his voice was so thick it nearly broke me. He's fine, Leo. You're both fine. I sagged against the pillows, tears of relief springing to my eyes. Really? Really, Julian confirmed, lifting his head to look at me. It wasn't an abruption. It was severe shock and bruising. The fall, it triggered contractions, but they managed to stop them. He's stressed, his heart rate was high, but he's settling down now. They want to keep you for observation for 48 hours, but the danger has passed. He reached out and gently rested his hand on my stomach. As if in response, a small, tentative kick pushed against his palm. Julian closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. I thought I lost you, he confessed, his voice barely audible. When she lunged, when you pushed me. He opened his eyes, and suddenly, the anger was back. Not at me, but at the situation. Why did you do that? He demanded, his grip on my hand tightening. Why did you push me? You should have run. You should have protected yourself. I was protecting you, I said simply. I am the alpha, he argued, his voice rising slightly. I am supposed to protect you. That is my job, Leo. I am the shield. You are the heart. If the shield breaks, it can be replaced. If the heart stops, the body dies. Do you understand? I cannot exist without you. And I can't exist without you, I countered, reaching up to touch his stubbled cheek. You think I could just stand there and watch you get stabbed? You think I could raise this baby alone? I would rather take 1,000 knives than watch you fall again, he said intensely. He kissed my palm, his lips pressing hard against the skin. I failed you tonight. I let my guard down. I let a threat get too close. You didn't fail, I soothed him. You caught her. You saved us. She will never touch anyone again, Julian said darkly. The temperature in the room dropped. I made a few calls while you were sleeping. I hesitated. Julian, what did you do? She is in police custody, he said, his face closing off. She is being charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. My lawyers are ensuring that bail is denied. She will spend the rest of her miserable life in a cell. That's good, I whispered. And, Julian continued, I have realized that my approach was flawed. I thought hiding you kept you safe. Then I thought showing you off would keep you safe. But the truth is, the world is too unpredictable. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. I'm hiring a permanent detail for you, he said. 4 guards. Round the clock. Ex-military. They will shadow you everywhere. Even to the bathroom if they have to stand outside the door. Julian, that's too much. It is not enough, he spun around, his eyes blazing. You almost died tonight, Leo. Because of a disgruntled employee. What happens when my actual enemies find out you are my weakness? Silas Thorne saw you. The whole city saw you. You are now the biggest target in the country. He walked back to the bed, looming over me. I will not take risks. Not anymore. You might hate me for it. You might feel suffocated. But you will be alive. And our son will be alive. I looked at him, this powerful, terrified man. I saw the love beneath the control. He wasn't trying to control me, he was trying to control a chaotic universe that kept trying to take me away from him. "I won't hate you," I said softly. "I know you're scared." "I'm scared too." I shimmied over in the narrow hospital bed, patting the empty space beside me. "Come here." "Leo, I'll hurt you." "The bed is too small." "I don't care." "Come here." He sighed, defeated. He kicked off his shoes and carefully, ever so carefully, climbed into the bed. He wrapped his arm around me, avoiding my stomach, and buried his face in my neck. We lay there in silence for a long time. "The press is outside," Julian murmured into my skin. "I assumed so." "They are calling you a hero," he said. The headlines. Billionaire's husband saves life of CEO. The Omega who fought back. I snorted weakly. I didn't fight back. I just fell over. "You threw yourself in front of a blade," Julian corrected. "They are calling it the romance of the century. He paused. "But there are other rumors too. Questions about your background. People digging into your past. Where you went to school. Who your parents were." I stiffened. My past wasn't exciting, but it was private. I didn't want the world dissecting my scholarship applications or my parents' debts. "Let them dig," Julian said fiercely. "They will find nothing but what I want them to find. I have scrubbed everything that could be used against you. As far as the world is concerned, you were born the day you met me." He pulled back to look at me. "But we need to control the narrative one last time. When we leave this hospital, we have to make a statement. A final one. To Silas, to the press, to everyone." "What kind of statement?" "We're going to get married," he said. I blinked. "We are already married." "We signed papers in a courthouse basement," Julian dismissed. "No. I mean a wedding. A real one. A massive, public, undeniable wedding. I want to renew our vows in front of the entire world. I want to put a crown on your head so heavy that no one will ever dare to question your place again." "A wedding?" I asked, looking at my bump. "Before the baby comes?" "As soon as you are cleared," Julian nodded. "In 2 weeks." 2 weeks? That's impossible to plan. "I am Julian Blackwood," he said with a rare, genuine smirk returning to his face. "Impossible is just a budget issue." He kissed me then, deep and possessive. "Rest now, my brave lion," he whispered. "Because when you wake up, we are going to war with the tabloids. And we are going to win." I closed my eyes, feeling safe in his arms. The nightmare of the restaurant and the gala felt like a distant memory. But as I drifted off, I couldn't shake a small, nagging feeling. Miss Vance was gone. Silas Thorne was cowed. The world knew who I was. But usually, when things seemed this perfect, this controlled, that was when the real storm hit. And I had a feeling that the digging the press was doing might unearth something even Julian hadn't been able to scrub. Something about me that even I didn't know. But that was a worry for tomorrow. Tonight, I was alive. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, The Crown of Winter. 2 weeks. 14 days. 336 hours. That was how long Julian Blackwood had given his team to organize the wedding of the century. In the world of high society, planning a gala took a year. Planning a wedding took 2. Planning a royal coronation for an Omega husband who had just survived an assassination attempt while simultaneously managing a pregnancy and a global media empire? That should have been impossible. But as Julian had said, impossible is just a budget issue. Our penthouse had transformed. It was no longer just a home, it was a command center. The dining room table was buried under swatches of silk, velvet, and lace. Florists, caterers, and security experts moved in and out of the service elevator in a silent, terrified stream, vetted by the 4 ex-military guards who now shadowed my every move. Team Alpha, Julian called them. I just called them the Shadows. They were nice enough, but having a 6'4" man named Tank stand outside the bathroom door while I peed took some getting used to. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom. The tailors had just left. I looked at my reflection. The suit was breathtaking. It wasn't a traditional tuxedo. It was a long coat made of ivory silk, embroidered with silver threads that looked like frost patterns on a window. It was structured to frame my shoulders but flowed loosely over my stomach, accentuating the bump rather than hiding it. I looked like a prince from a winter fairy tale. "You look," a deep voice rumbled from the doorway, like something I dreamed up. I turned. Julian was leaning against the doorframe. He looked exhausted. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the attack, but his eyes were burning with that familiar intensity. "It's a bit much, isn't it?" I asked, smoothing the silk. "Ivory and silver? I feel like a walking chandelier." Julian walked over, entering my personal space. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his hands resting on my stomach over the expensive fabric. He rested his chin on my shoulder, looking at our reflection in the mirror. "You are the light of my life, Leo," he whispered, inhaling my scent. "Why shouldn't you look like it?" "Are you sure about this, Julian?" I asked, my voice quiet. "The press, they're still camped outside. They're calling me the Cinderella groom. They're digging into my parents' bankruptcy. They're saying I'm a gold digger who got lucky." Julian's expression darkened in the mirror. "Let them talk. Today, we silence them. Today, I don't just tell them you are mine. I show them that without you, the Blackwood Empire is dust." He turned me around and kissed me, a slow, deep claim that made my knees weak. "Are you ready to go? The helicopter is waiting on the roof." "Helicopter?" I blinked. "I thought we were taking the limo." "Too risky," Julian said, his face hard. "Traffic, snipers, unpredictable variables. We fly." The venue, the glass cathedral. Julian hadn't rented a ballroom. He had rented the Botanical Gardens, specifically, the massive Victorian glasshouse that sat on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. It was winter, so the gardens outside were covered in snow, a stark, white blanket. But inside the glass dome, it was a tropical paradise. Thousands of white orchids had been flown in from Singapore. Crystal chandeliers hung from the iron rafters, catching the winter sun and scattering rainbows everywhere. There were 500 guests seated on white velvet chairs. The mayor. The governor. Tech moguls. Movie stars. And yes, even Silas Thorne, sitting in the third row, looking humble and terrified, exactly as Julian had promised. When the music started, a live orchestra playing a hauntingly beautiful version of Can't Help Falling in Love, the heavy oak doors opened. I walked down the aisle alone. Usually, an Omega is given away by their father. But my parents were gone, passed away years ago. And Julian had offered to walk with me, but I had refused. I walked into that restaurant alone, I had told him. I walked out of it with you. I want to walk to you now, on my own 2 feet, to show them I'm not weak. A collective gasp went through the crowd as I stepped onto the white runner. The ivory coat shimmered under the lights. I held my head high, one hand resting protectively on my bump. I saw the cameras flashing, but I didn't look at them. I didn't look at the celebrities. I looked at the end of the aisle. Julian stood there. He was wearing a black velvet tuxedo that absorbed the light, contrasting perfectly with my white one. He stood tall, powerful, an alpha at the peak of his strength. But as our eyes met, I saw his composure crack. He looked at me with such raw, unadulterated worship that I felt tears prick my eyes. He didn't care about the cameras. He didn't care about the guests. He only saw me. When I reached the altar, Julian stepped down to meet me. He didn't wait for me to climb the steps. He took my hand and helped me up, treating me like I was made of spun glass. The officiant began the ceremony, speaking about love and duty, but the world faded away. Then, it was time for the vows. Julian took both my hands. He didn't use a microphone, but his voice carried to the back of the glass dome, clear and steady. "Leo," he began. "Before I met you, I was a ghost. I had money, power, and influence, but I was hollow. I built walls to keep the world out, thinking strength meant solitude. He paused, his thumbs stroking my knuckles. Then you walked into my life. You, with your messy hair and your stubborn pride and your heart that is too big for this cruel world. You didn't care about my money. You cared that I ate lunch. You cared that I slept. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. I smiled through my tears. 2 weeks ago, Julian continued, his voice thickening with emotion, I almost lost you. And in that moment, I realized that if you were gone, I would cease to exist. You are not just my husband. You are my compass. You are my breath. He looked at my stomach, then back at my eyes. I vow to protect you against all threats, foreign and domestic. I vow to destroy anyone who tries to dim your light. I vow to honor you, to serve you, and to love you until the stars burn out and the universe goes dark. You are my alpha, my omega, my everything. I was crying openly now. I sniffled, trying to find my voice. Julian, I choked out. I didn't write anything that good. The crowd laughed again, a warm sound this time. I don't need poetry, Julian whispered. Just you. I vow, I said, squeezing his hands, to be your home. When the world is loud, I will be your quiet. When you are tired of fighting, I will be your rest. I vow to love you, not for what you have, but for who you are, the man who rubs my feet, the man who eats cold risotto with me, the man who saved my life. I love you, Julian. I pronounce you, the officiant said, his own voice sounding a bit watery, partners for life. You may seal the bond. Julian didn't hesitate. He pulled me in, dipping me slightly, and kissed me. It wasn't a polite wedding kiss. It was a passionate, claiming kiss that lasted a few seconds too long for polite society, but just long enough for us. The crowd erupted into applause. As we turned to face them, Julian kept his arm around me. He looked at the cameras, his expression shifting from lover to protector. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice booming. My husband. Leo Blackwood. It was a warning. It was a declaration. He is a Blackwood. Touch him and die. And as I looked out at the sea of applauding people, the same people who would have sneered at me 2 weeks ago, I realized something. I wasn't the waiter who got lucky. I wasn't the victim. I was the partner of a king. And I had earned my crown. Epilogue, 3 months later. The screaming was louder than I expected. Julian! I hate you. You did this to me. I know, baby, I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I am never letting you touch me again. Ah! The delivery room at St. Jude's was chaotic. The doctors were calm, but I was definitely not. Labor was intense. Breathe, Leo. Just like we practiced, Julian soothed, wiping sweat from my forehead with a cool cloth. He looked terrified. His hand was being crushed in my grip, his fingers turning purple, but he didn't complain. One more push, Leo. I can see the head, the doctor encouraged. I can't. I sobbed, falling back against the pillows. I'm too tired. Julian, I can't. Yes, you can, Julian said, his voice dropping into that alpha command tone, but filled with infinite tenderness. He leaned close to my ear. You are the strongest person I know. You stood up to the world for us. You can do this. Bring him home, Leo. Bring our son home. Bring him home. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with Julian's scent. I focused on the love, the safety, the future we had built. I pushed. I pushed with everything I had left. And then, a cry. A high, thin, beautiful wail that cut through the air. It's a boy, the doctor announced, lifting the tiny, squirming bundle. I collapsed, gasping for air, laughing and crying at the same time. They cleaned him up quickly and placed him on my chest. He was tiny, red-faced, and furious. He had a tuft of black hair, Julian's hair. Hi, I whispered, touching his tiny cheek. Hi there, little bean. Julian leaned over us. He looked at the baby, and the mighty Julian Blackwood, the terror of Wall Street, burst into tears. He buried his face in the mattress next to my shoulder, his shoulders shaking. "He's perfect," Julian choked out. He's us. "He has your nose," I noted tiredly. "He has your chin," Julian countered, kissing my temple. "Thank you. Thank you, Leo." 1 year later. The headline on the tablet screen read, "Blackwood heir turns 1, the extravagant birthday party and the charity fund that raised millions." I swiped the screen off and set the tablet on the coffee table. I walked out onto the terrace of the penthouse. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Down in the private garden we had built on the roof, Julian was sitting on a picnic blanket. He was wearing a casual sweater and jeans, a sight the public rarely saw. Crawling all over him was Orion, our son. Orion was giggling, trying to shove a stuffed toy lion into Julian's mouth. "No, Orion, Daddy doesn't eat lions," Julian was explaining patiently, laughing as the baby grabbed his nose. I leaned against the doorframe, watching them. My heart felt so full it might burst. It felt like a lifetime ago that I had stood in the rain outside the Gilded Spoon, humiliated and alone. Ms. Vance was in prison, serving a 15-year sentence. The restaurant had been turned into a shelter for at-risk Omega youth, funded entirely by the Blackwood Foundation. I visited it once a month to help out. And me? I wasn't just a trophy husband. I had gone back to school, finishing my degree. I was designing a line of affordable maternity wear for Omegas, proving that you didn't need to be a billionaire to look dignified. Julian looked up and saw me watching. His face lit up. "Come join us," he called out. "Orion is winning the wrestling match." I walked over and sat down on the blanket. Orion immediately abandoned his father and crawled into my lap, babbling happily. Julian wrapped his arm around my shoulders, pulling us both close. The city lights flickered on below us, a sea of stars. "Happy?" Julian asked, kissing the top of my head. I looked at my son, healthy and safe. I looked at my husband, who looked at me as if I hung the moon. "Craving something?" Julian teased, remembering that fateful day. "Risotto? Caviar?" I laughed. "Actually, I think I just want a grilled cheese sandwich." Julian chuckled. "I think the chef can manage that. Or, I could make it." "You?" I raised an eyebrow. "You'll burn the kitchen down." "I'll have you know I've been practicing," he said with mock indignation. "We'll see," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. I looked out at the city one last time. It was big, it was loud, and it could be cruel. But up here, in our fortress, with my alpha and my pup, I knew one thing for certain. I was home. And no one would ever make me feel small again. The end.